The Chamber of Echoes was not built for comfort. It was carved from the heart of a gravitationally locked asteroid, a monument to the cold permanence of political reality. Its walls were of a polished, obsidian-like substance that did not reflect light so much as swallow it, creating the unnerving impression that the space extended into an infinite, starless void. In the center, a disk of pure, solidified light served as the conclave floor, upon which the holographic avatars or physically present emissaries of the galaxy's dominant species stood. Today, the light felt dimmer, the silence between pronouncements heavier, as if weighed down by the gravity of a star on the verge of collapse. The air itself, a carefully calibrated mix of inert gases suitable for a dozen different respiratory systems, seemed thin and charged with a tension that was almost physical. Xyloprime of the luminous theocracy felt it in the subtle resonance of his crystalline substructure. His people did not experience emotion as a fleeting chemical reaction, but as a slow, tidal shift in their internal harmonic frequencies. For cycles, his own frequency had been trending towards a dissonant hum of profound unease. The subject of this conclave session, like so many before it, was the species known as humans. A new name on the galactic stage, a whisper from a forgotten sector of the Orion Arm, a species of baffling contradictions. "They are a transient anomaly," boomed the voice of High Lord Vorlag of the Cathar hegemony. His physical form was present, a towering monument of muscle, chitin, and unwavering certainty. The Cathar were a warrior race, their philosophy forged in the crucible of a high-gravity world where only the relentlessly aggressive survived. Their empire was a testament to this creed, vast, orderly, and merciless. Vorlag's every gesture was a display of power, from the clench of his four-fingered hands to the contemptuous flare of his mandibles. They cling to a single star system, their expansionary impulse stunted. Their broadcasts are a chaotic mess of meaningless art and primitive mathematics. They have established no colonies, built no fleets of consequence, and made no overtures for inclusion in this great conclave. They are insignificant, a footnote in the galactic codex. He paused, letting his words hang in the oppressive quiet. His gaze swept across the assembled figures, daring any to disagree. Many shifted, their avatars flickering with nervous energy. The Cathar hegemony's shadow was long, and few were willing to stand in its path. "Their silence is what troubles me, High Lord," Xyloprime projected, his voice a series of soft, melodic chimes that nonetheless cut through the chamber's somber atmosphere. His form was a slender, multifaceted crystal, light refracting through his being in complex, shimmering patterns that conveyed his thoughts and emotional state more honestly than any spoken word. "My people have observed them for longer than most. We have archived their transmissions from their earliest days of radio. You call their broadcasts chaotic. We perceive a pattern, an evolution of thought that is terrifying in its speed. They mastered their world's atomic forces in less than a single one of our gestational cycles. Their philosophical and ethical debates, which you dismiss as meaningless, are more complex and self-critical than those of species 1,000 millennia their senior." Vorlag let out a low growl, a sound like grinding stone that was the Cathar equivalent of a derisive laugh. "Philosophy does not win wars, Luminous. It is a luxury of the decadent and the weak. Their lack of a fleet is not a sign of enlightened restraint. It is a sign of technical deficiency. They are primitives who have stumbled upon subspace radio and now chirp their nonsense into a cosmos that is far beyond their comprehension." Or, Xyloprime chimed, his internal light pulsing with a soft, cautionary blue, "They are a people who have looked upon the tools of conquest and, unlike every other species we have ever encountered, consciously chosen to set them aside. Is that not a possibility worth considering? That their power may not lie in warships and mass drivers, but in something else entirely? Something we in our ancient wisdom have failed to recognize." The debate was old, but the stakes were new. The Cathar hegemony, in its endless quest for consolidation and control, had announced its intention to pacify the Keplerian Veil, a nebula rich in rare elements that bordered human-claimed territory. The Conclave knew what pacification meant, the systematic subjugation or eradication of any local powers to secure Cathar dominance. The true purpose was not resources, but a message aimed squarely at the silent system of Sol. The hegemony was preparing an armada, a fleet of such scale and power that its very assembly caused gravitational tides in the surrounding star systems. It was a hammer being raised. Ed and the humans were the anvil against which its might would be demonstrated. "Your caution is noted, Xyloprime," said a new voice, this one smooth and synthetic. It belonged to the emissary of the Signian technocracy, a being of pure data inhabiting a swirling cloud of nanites. "However, our projections align with the hegemony's assessment. Humanity's energy signature is negligible. Their industrial output is localized. Their gravitational footprint is consistent with a pre-interstellar power. They pose no credible threat. The deployment of the Armada of righteous fire is, from a strategic perspective, an overallocation of resources, but its political value as a demonstration of hegemonic stability is logical. Xyloprime felt a wave of frustration, a discordant jangling in his core. Logic without wisdom was a dangerous thing. The technocracy saw only data, not the soul behind it. They could measure a star's energy output, but they could not comprehend the meaning of a supernova. And what of the reports from the outer listen posts? The gravitational anomalies, the whispers of vessels that appear and disappear without a drive signature. Vorlag slammed a massive fist onto the railing before him, the impact sending a shudder through the holographic displays. Uncorroborated sensor ghosts, illusions born of your own species, paranoia luminous. You see shadows in every nebula because your people have not fought a real war in 10,000 years. You have forgotten the simple, brutal truth of this galaxy. Strength respects only strength. The humans have shown none. We will move the Armada to the Keplerian Veil. We will establish our glorious dominion, and the mewling primates of Sol will watch, and they will learn their place. The High Lord's gaze locked with Xyloprime's. In the Cathar's dark, multifaceted eyes, the luminous elder saw not malice, but a terrifying, absolute certainty. The blindness of a creature that has only ever known how to be a hammer, and thus sees every problem as a nail. There was no room for debate, no space for doubt. The decision was made. The Cathar would not be swayed. The Armada would fly. As the conclave session dissolved, the figures of light and flesh fading back to their respective empires, Xyloprime remained. He stood alone on the disk of light, the great chamber now truly silent, its echoes finally at rest. He thought of the humans. He had spent a great deal of his long life studying them from afar, sifting through the deluge of information they so carelessly cast into the void. He had listened to their symphonies, compositions of such profound sorrow and joy that they resonated with the very structure of his being. He had read their philosophies, their endless, agonizing quest for meaning in a universe they believed to be random and empty. He had watched their histories, a repeating cycle of self-destruction and miraculous rebirth, of unimaginable cruelty and transcendent compassion. They were, to him, the most terrifying species he had ever encountered, not because of any weapon they might possess, but because of their boundless, volatile potential. They were a species that could weep at the death of a fictional character one moment and incinerate a city the next. They were simultaneously the most destructive and the most creative force he had ever seen. The Cathar saw a primitive society. Xyloprime saw a chrysalis, and he feared with a deep and resonant certainty that vibrated through his entire crystalline form what would emerge when the hegemony's hammer struck it. The Armada of righteous fire was not just a fleet. It was a catalyst, and the galaxy, in its arrogant slumber, had no idea what it was about to awaken. The bridge of the Asterisk Indomitable was a cathedral of war. Grand Admiral Thrax stood upon the command dais, a platform elevated above the bustling pits of his crew, and surveyed his domain. Through the vast, diamond-paned viewscreen, space itself seemed to bend to his glory. Before him, behind him, and to all sides stretched the Armada of righteous fire. It was not a fleet. It was a migrating nation of steel and plasma. A river of dreadnoughts, cruisers, and strike craft that blotted out the stars. The combined energy of their drive cores created a false dawn, a shimmering incandescent wave that preceded them through the void. They were the fist of the hegemony, the very definition of absolute power, and Thrax was the mind that guided it. He was Cathar, bred and trained for this single purpose. His carapace was scarred from 100 campaigns, his mind honed to a razor's edge of strategic perfection. He felt none of the political anxieties that plagued courtiers like Vorlag. His world was one of vectors, weapon yields, and the glorious, simple calculus of overwhelming force. The mission was clear. Proceed to the Keplerian Veil, establish a forward operating base, and ignore the primitives in the nearby Sol system. The demonstration of P. Or was the objective. Their reaction, if any, was irrelevant. Admiral, a sub-commander's voice crackled from a comms pit, his tone rigidly formal. We have a contact, single vessel, bearing 009er relative. Thrax did not even turn. Raider, scavenger, identify and warn it off. If it fails to comply, erase it. Such gnats were common on the fringes of civilized space. A pause, longer than expected. The disciplined hum of the bridge seemed to falter for a microsecond. Admiral, we cannot get a positive identification. It does not match any known ship configuration in the Conclave database, and its drive signature, it is non-existent. Now Thrax turned, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. He strode to the primary tactical display, a holographic nebula of swirling light that showed the Armada's position. A single, stark white icon had appeared at the edge of the sensor range. It was small, impossibly small, a grain of sand against his tidal wave of a fleet. "Magnify," he commanded, his voice a low rumble. The image on the main view screen shifted, zooming in with breathtaking speed. The vessel came into focus. It was sleek, featureless, and utterly black, a sliver of absolute void against the backdrop of distant stars. There were no visible weapon ports, no sensor arrays, no engine glow, no running lights. It was like a shard of the space between galaxies, given form and purpose. It simply hung there, motionless, directly in their path. "It is hailing us, Admiral," the comms officer reported, a note of disbelief in his voice. On screen, Thrax grunted, crossing his powerful arms over his chest. This was an amusing diversion, some lost explorer perhaps, or a fool with a death wish. The screen flickered, replaced by a view of a ship's interior. The design was minimalist, ascetic. The lighting was soft, indirect. In the center of the frame stood a single being, a human, a female by their species' dimorphic standards. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was calm, pale, and symmetrical. Her eyes, a shade of dark gray, were level and showed no fear, no awe, no emotion at all. She wore a simple dark blue uniform devoid of rank or insignia. "This is human vessel Solitude *," she said. Her voice was clear, the translation software rendering it into perfect Cathar without any accent or inflection. It was as calm and featureless as her ship. "You have entered a restricted sector under the Sol Accord. Your fleet is generating a significant chronoton resonance cascade. We request you power down your primary drives and alter your course immediately." A stunned silence fell over the bridge of the Indomitable will *. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of the statement was breathtaking. Thrax felt a slow, hot rage begin to build in his chest. Single, unidentified ship, representing a species of backwater primates, was giving orders to the most powerful armada in the galaxy. He stepped forward, his massive form filling the camera's pickup. "I am Grand Admiral Thrax of the Cathar Hegemony, commanding the Armada of Righteous Fire. You are addressing a sovereign military force. Your Sol Accord is a meaningless decree from an unrecognized power. You are the one who will alter course. Now." The human female's expression did not change. It was like looking at a statue. "Your identity is acknowledged, Grand Admiral. The nature of your force is also acknowledged. It does not alter the request. Your current trajectory will cause irreparable harm to the nascent biome of Kepler 186f, a protected pre-sapient world. This constitutes a violation of the first principle of non-interference. Furthermore, the resonance from your drives is undesirable. Please power them down." Thrax threw his head back and laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the bridge. His crew, sensing his mood, stirred with aggressive energy. "First principle, non-interference? These are the mewling philosophies of the weak human. The universe does not reward restraint. It rewards strength, will, and the ambition to shape reality to your design. Your protected world is a ball of mud. My fleet is the instrument of galactic destiny. We will not be diverted by the superstitions of primitives." He leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "This is your only warning. Move your insignificant vessel or I will atomize it and scatter its particles across this sector as a monument to your foolishness." For the first time, something flickered in the human's eyes. It was not fear. It was something deeper, more ancient. It looked almost like pity. "The principle is not a philosophy, Admiral," she said, her voice still perfectly level, yet now carrying an immense weight. "It is a law of reality, as is the consequence for its violation. Your failure to comprehend this does not grant you immunity. We have registered your intent. The arbitration is complete. The consequence is now absolute." Before Thrax could even process the words to issue the command to fire, the transmission cut out. The image of the serene human vanished, replaced once more by the view of the small, black ship. It still hung there, silent, motionless. "Admiral," his tactical officer asked, his voice tight with anticipation. "Your orders." "Target that vessel," Thrax snarled, his rage finally boiling over. "Fire a single purification lance. I don't want it destroyed. I want it crippled, its crew alive to contemplate their arrogance as we tow them to the hegemony for judgment." Locking target, firing solution confirmed, firing lance. A beam of pure white-hot energy, a lance of coherent light powerful enough to core a small moon, erupted from the forward spine of the Indomitable will *. It crossed the distance between the ships in an instant. But it never arrived. It did not impact a shield. It was not deflected. It simply stopped. A few shiplengths from the human vessel's hull, the lance of brilliant energy ceased to exist. It did not dissipate or explode. It was just gone, as if the reality it was traveling through had been edited, its existence deleted from the equation. A collective gasp went through the bridge. Every Cathar warrior stared at the view screen, their ingrained certainty shaken to its core. Thrax's mandibles hung slightly agape. What was this? What technology could simply negate energy on such a scale? Then a sound began. It was not a sound in the air, for there was none. It was a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the ship, a low, pervasive hum that resonated deep within the bodies of the crew. On the view screen, the space around the human vessel, the Solitude Asterisk, began to shimmer, to distort. It was not a cloaking field or a spatial warp. It was something far more fundamental. The stars behind it seemed to bend and flow, as if space-time itself were becoming fluid. "What is happening?" Thrax demanded, his voice betraying the first crack in his iron composure. "Report." The sensor readings were impossible. "Admiral, all universal constants in the target's vicinity are in flux," the science officer stammered, his claws clicking frantically over his console. "Gravitational constant, Planck length, the speed of light itself, it's not stable. The ship isn't projecting a field. It is asterisk the field. It's imposing its own localized physics on the region." The hum intensified. The small, black ship seemed to grow darker, absorbing not just light but the very concept of visibility. It became a perfect hole in the universe, and from that hole a wave expanded. It was not a wave of energy or matter. It was a wave of nothing, a wave of ontological dissolution. The first ships of the Armada it touched did not explode. They simply ceased to be. One moment a mighty Cathar battlecruiser, a kilometer of armor and weapons, was there. The next it was gone. No debris, no radiation, no flash of light, just an empty patch of space where a warship had been a moment before. The wave expanded, silent and inexorable. It passed through another cruiser and a squadron of frigates. They vanished like reflections wiped from a mirror. Panic, a concept utterly alien to a Cathar bridge crew, began to take hold. Warriors were shouting, their disciplined reports turning into terrified questions. Alarms blared, their urgent cries suddenly sounding pathetic and meaningless in the face of this silent, absolute negation. Thrax stood frozen on his dais, his mind unable to process what his eyes were seeing. This was not warfare. This was not combat. This was pest control. A force was moving through his fleet, not fighting it, but simply unmaking it, erasing it from existence as if it were a trivial error in a cosmic calculation. He thought of the human's calm, serene face. The consequence is now absolute. The wave reached the asterisk, indomitable will asterisk. The forward section of the dreadnought, the massive prow with its purification lance, dissolved into nothingness. There was no jolt, no sound of tearing metal. The men and women stationed there were simply gone. The wave continued to move down the length of the ship, a slow, patient tide of erasure. Decks, corridors, engine rooms, all of it just stopped being. Thrax looked at his hands. He saw the chitin on his knuckles begin to lose its color, its texture turning smooth and featureless. He felt no pain. He only felt a profound, soul-shattering sense of incomprehension. His strength, his fleet, his entire philosophy of existence was meaningless. He had brought a sword to a debate about the nature of reality itself, and his opponent had just ended the debate by turning off the universe in his immediate vicinity. His last sight was the view screen. The wave of non-existence was washing over the bridge. His crew was fading, their forms becoming translucent, their panicked cries silencing as their very being was unwritten. And through it all, in the center of the screen, His small, black, silent ship remained, the Solitude Asterisk, a vessel that did not carry weapons because it was a weapon, a ship that did not need to fight because it could simply decide that its enemies no longer existed. It was the ship they had never expected, and in his final moment of consciousness, Grand Admiral Thrax understood. The humans were not silent because they were weak. They were silent because, when they chose to speak, their words were final. The Chamber of Echoes was no longer silent. It was a cacophony of panic. The data feeds from the Keplerian Veil had arrived, transmitted by autonomous deep space probes that had witnessed the event from a safe distance. The feeds played on the main holographic display in the center of the chamber, a silent, looping testament to an event so far outside the known parameters of warfare that it defied categorization. One moment, the Armada of Righteous Fire, the symbol of Cathar dominance for 500 cycles, a force that had crushed empires and cowed entire sectors of the galaxy into submission, was a glorious river of light and power. The next, it was gone, not destroyed, not defeated, but erased. The probe's sensor logs were even more terrifying than the visual data. They showed no energy spikes, no debris fields, no radiation signatures consistent with any known weapon. They just showed a fleet of thousands of warships, and then, a few moments later, empty space. The universe had been edited and the Armada had been redacted. High Lord Vorlag stood frozen in his place, his massive form, usually so dominant and imposing, now seeming small and brittle. His face was a mask of disbelief, his chitinous plates having gone a pale, sickly gray. The foundation of his entire civilization, the unshakable belief in the supremacy of military might, had been pulverized in less time than it took for a single one of his hearts to beat. The other emissaries were in a state of collective shock, their avatars flickering wildly, their voices a babble of fearful conjecture. Into this chaos, a single, calm tone cut through the noise. A universal communication request chime. It was a sound no one had expected to hear. It was coming from the humans. A hush fell over the chamber, thick with dread. After a moment of hesitation, the Cygnian emissary, his nanite cloud swirling anxiously, accepted the channel. The main display changed. The looping video of the Armada's disappearance was replaced by the same image that Grand Admiral Thrax had seen in his final moments. The calm, minimalist interior of the human ship Solitude Asterisk. And in the center, the same human female, her expression as placid and unreadable as before. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the Sol Accord," she said, her voice echoing in the vast, silent chamber. It was not a voice of triumph or gloating. It was the voice of a technician delivering a report. "We are addressing the Grand Conclave. We trust you have received the data from the Keplerian Veil." Xylo Prime was the first to find his voice, the chimes soft and heavy with gravitas. "We have, Ambassador. We do not understand. What was that? What weapon have you unleashed?" Ambassador Rostova's gaze seemed to meet his, and for the first time he felt a direct, focused intelligence behind those gray eyes. "The Asterisk Solitude Asterisk is not a weapon emissary. It is a tool of ontological arbitration. It does not destroy. It resolves paradoxes. The Cathar Armada, by its very existence and intent in that specific region of space-time, represented a paradox that could not be reconciled with foundational laws. The tool was applied and the paradox was resolved. The words were precise, clinical, and utterly terrifying. They spoke of power on a scale that made the Cathar's purification lances seem like children's toys. They had not fought a battle. They had enforced a concept. High Lord Vorlag finally moved, taking a trembling step forward. "Foundational laws, paradoxes," he rasped, his booming voice now a broken whisper. "You speak in riddles, human. You annihilated the greatest military force in this galactic arm. You have committed an act of war on a scale unseen in millennia." "No," Rostova replied, her calmness an unshakable wall against his shattered rage. "An act of war implies a conflict between two competing wills. This was not a conflict. It was a correction. The Cathar hegemony acted out of an ignorance of the true nature of reality. We simply demonstrated that nature to them." She paused, letting the weight of her statement settle in the chamber. "You see ships and fleets and empires. You see territory to be conquered and resources to be claimed. Your understanding of the universe is fundamentally, dangerously incomplete. You are like children playing with fire in a library of ancient, flammable texts, unaware of the inferno you are about to unleash." Xylo Prime felt a profound resonance with her words, a chilling affirmation of his deepest fears. "Tell us," he chimed, his own form pulsing with an urgent, questioning light. "What is it that we do not see?" Ambassador Rostova's expression shifted. The placid neutrality gave way to a deep, profound solemnity. It was the look of a being carrying a burden of unimaginable weight. "You see the stars," she began, her voice now a low, mesmerizing current. "But you do not hear the silence between them. You have developed technologies that tear at the fabric of space-time, warp drives, subspace comms, singularity power cores. You believe these are simple tools. They are not. Every time you activate a warp drive, you are screaming. Every time you use a singularity, you are lighting a bonfire in a dark, ancient forest. A forest filled with things that have been sleeping for eons, things that hunt by the light of such fires." A coldness that had nothing to do with temperature washed over the conclave. The concept was so alien, so terrifying, that it short-circuited the strategic and political minds of everyone present. "Our species is older than you believe," Rostova continued. "We have risen and fallen before. In a previous cycle, we were much like you, arrogant, expansionist, loud. We filled the void with our signals and our fleets, and something answered. We call them the listeners. They are not a species or an empire. They are a universal phenomenon, a form of cosmic selection. They are drawn to the resonance of complex, reality-altering technology. They perceive it as a discordant note in the universal symphony, and their purpose is to restore the silence." She gestured to the space around her. "We were almost completely annihilated. A handful of us survived, hidden away, forced to relearn everything. We found the echoes of other civilizations that had met the same fate. The warnings were always there, buried in the cosmic microwave background in the quantum foam." A quiet message from a race of precursors that said only one thing: be still. The truth, when it came, was a cataclysm. Humanity was not a young race, but an ancient, traumatized one. Their lack of expansion was not weakness. It was a terrified, self-imposed quarantine. Their simple-looking ships were not primitive. They were the apex of a completely different technological path, one based not on manipulating energy, but on manipulating reality itself. Solitude and its kind were not warships. They were the galaxy's quiet guardians, its silent wardens trying to keep the other, younger races from making a noise that would bring down the hunters. The Cathar Armada, Rostova said, her gaze turning to the still-reeling Vorlag, was more than just a fleet. The combined resonance of its drive systems, concentrated in one place, was not just a shout. It was a beacon, a focused, sustained signal screaming your location and ours into the great dark. It was a threat not just to us, but to every sentient species in this galactic arm. We could not allow that signal to continue. The choice was to erase your fleet or to allow your fleet to doom us all. We made the logical choice. We enforced the silence. The Chamber of Echoes was utterly still. The political squabbles, the territorial disputes, the centuries of ingrained arrogance, all of it seemed like the petty arguments of infants in the face of this revelation. They had been living on the shores of a dark, cosmic ocean, believing themselves masters of the world, while the humans were the only ones who knew of the leviathans that swam in its depths. Vorlag, the High Lord of a now-broken hegemony, slowly sank to his knees. The gesture was so un-Cathar, so completely antithetical to their culture of pride, that it sent a shockwave of its own through the conclave. It was the posture of supplication, of utter, comprehensive defeat. What have we done? He whispered, the question not directed at the human, but at the universe itself. For the first time since she had appeared, Ambassador Eva Rostova's face softened, and Xyloprime saw in her eyes not the coldness of a judge, but the weariness of a lonely sentinel. "You have announced our presence," she said, her voice imbued with a shared, terrible sorrow. "And now we must all learn how to be quiet together." Communication channel closed, leaving the assembled species of the Grand Conclave alone with a silence that was suddenly, profoundly terrifying. It was no longer the absence of noise. It was a presence. A vast, listening, patient darkness. Xyloprime looked around the chamber at the shattered pride of the Cathar, the fearful calculations of the Signian, the stunned immobility of the others. They had all been so proud of their light, their empires, their noise. They had measured their worth by the size of their shadows. He thought again of humanity, of their sad music, their self-doubting philosophies, their strange capacity for both profound love and terrible violence. He had seen them as a contradiction. Now he saw them as the on. Lie species mature enough to understand the truth. They were not a chrysalis waiting to become a conqueror. They were the survivors of a fire, huddling together for warmth, desperately trying to keep the embers from flaring up again. Their power was not for conquest, but for preservation. A terrible, necessary power to enforce the one rule that mattered in a universe far older and more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined. The great galactic game of empires and armadas was over. A new era had begun. An era of fear, of caution, of unity born not from ambition, but from a shared, existential dread. They were all in the dark forest now. And the humans, the quiet, underestimated, terrifyingly powerful humans, were the only ones who knew the way. The future would not be one of glorious expansion, but of careful, quiet survival, all of them listening for the things that hunted in the silence between the stars.